Welcome to the Successfully Unemployed Show. My name is Dustin Heiner, and I'm here to help you learn how to quit that JOB, that just over broke job, by investing, by having a side hustle, by being somebody who actually brings money together and buys into apartment complexes, things like that. And today I am super pumped to bring on an expert who has been doing this for a long time with making and investing and using other people's money and getting apartment complexes. This is awesome. Elisa, Zhang, thank you so much for being here on the show with me.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Dustin.
Yeah, this is great. So I was on your podcast. So that was, everybody definitely needs to check out your podcast, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But I wanted to bring you on because you have so much great insights in lots of things. And I was like, man, I got to bring you on the show. So would you tell us, what do you do to provide for yourself and your family without working that dead end job?
Thank you, Dustin. So I own and operate apartment. And some of these apartments I syndicate, which is just a fancy word for pulling people's money together to buy it together. So I only specialize in apartment buildings. So that's kind of what I do.
So you do both the managing of the property, like finding the property, managing the property, and raising money, like all the above.
Yes. So we're actually in the process of opening our own property management company and taking out a few properties from our third-party managers to start operating ourselves as well.
That's fantastic. So you probably weren't always doing this. Can you talk to us about what you were doing before and then how you got into this and any nervousness or anything that you went through?
So I was a computer engineer and I worked for Fortune 500 companies and as a product manager for a very long time, probably over 10 years. Before I started investing, maybe I worked 9 years before I start investing my own personal stuff. And just being kind of using my own money, buying properties, buying hold is mostly the strategy that I have, from the smaller individual condos to single family homes, then fourplexes, then into, commercial multifamily. It's always being apartments. And once I started investing outside of the state, that's where I learned the syndication because, I was told that you got to have more than 100 unit in order to make scalability. So once you go outside of the state, then you start learning you need partnerships and etc. And then from there, that's how we learn about syndication because we don't have money to buy 100 unit properties, right? It's a very slow accumulation, just saving money yourself. That's where we learn how to, pull people's money together and actually make investment opportunities for our investors and so that they can get a return as well.
That's great. Do you mind if I ask how many doors that you manage or own or a part of right now?
Yeah, so we have anywhere between 2,500 to 3,000 units right now. The reason why I say anywhere in between is, we always buy and sell. Any given days, the number may be different.
If I wanted to, because this is a big reason why I brought you on the show, I was thinking, my goodness, I think it would be great to be somebody not necessarily that buys the apartment complexes, does all that work, because there's a lot of work that's involved. When you buy a single family home, it's so, in my opinion, so much less work, so many less balls to juggle and all that sort of stuff. And I love doing that. That's easy. And so I don't want to necessarily be a operator who finds the property, buys it, all that sort and runs it. I don't want to do that. I'd rather be somebody who pools people to money together because with Master Passive Income, with Successfully Unemployed, with my conference that I've created, the Real Estate Wealth Builders Conference, I have so many people that either want me to teach them how to invest in real estate or they want to say, Dustin, let me give you my money so that you could invest it and I can make a good return on it. Usually I'm just like, oh, let me just give you to somebody else. Let me pass it on. But I realize, you know what? They trust me and I'm not going to use their money. Obviously, I'm as much as I can with integrity, not do anything that I would not do myself. Like I would not put their money in something that I would not put my own money in. And so They trust me in that. So if I wanted to start where I am the one that brings money together, I mean, it seems like I have to network with people and then I have to make sure that they want to invest and then they have a product that we're going to buy, a property, but there are probably so many steps in there. So what would you say, like if we're going to get started investing and having that syndication mindset where you're pulling people's money together, how do we get started in doing that?
Yeah, so definitely, I think this is where like in multifamily investing, the partnerships becomes really important. And then once you kind of enter this larger apartment rim, is when I realized that you no longer have the me team, you have like the we team. So everybody's kind of specializing in certain things. I would just say this is like, it depends on how the legal structure is structured. Just raising money for a certain type of structure, like being a GP, but only raising money is likely not legal. So you will have to participate into things like a truly asset management, making decisions for asset management. So there is some involvement if you're going to go that route. The other route to do it is you can curate a fund for yourself. So then you become a fund manager and you you can even blend your investment like single family home stuff along with the multifamily return. Like you can create a fund. Obviously, I make it sound really easy creating a fund. It's a lot of work doing that. But working with a lawyer, security lawyer on creating a fund. So then you have an objective of meeting your investors' returns through a fund, and through the fund, then you can make decision to invest that fund into deals, right? So that could be another way that works. And another way to work at this, we talked about the GP path and the fund manager path. And then the other way is really kind of like the hard piece, is to get a security license. So then as a security broker, you can raise money and get a payback commissions. So that's kind of how the good old world works with security, like license people who have security broker license, they're able to do so. So these are kind of the three very well known way to get involved. Again, the first method over here is like you have to participate in asset management. You have to be, that's legal, because as a GP of the deal, it's your deal. That's why you can raise money for it. That's kind of obviously my way to do it, because I'm operating the deals and etc.
That makes sense. And so we have the general partner, which is what GP. Then you also have the creating a fund, where you have a fund of people putting money into. I almost like the idea of having a fund, because I have so many students. In fact, just yesterday I had a student say, "Hey, Dustin, I have this fantastic deal, but I don't have the money." And I've looked at the deal to make sure that it looks good, how he's going to make money in passive income. Everything's going to look good. Like, this is a good deal. And I just don't have the system. So I could just lend him my money, and my own personal money, and then, get a kickback on that. But I was thinking, deals like this come all the time from my students. They have the deals, but they don't necessarily have the money. So if I created my own fund that we could just invest wherever is going to be a good fit and then pay back, that's a great option as well. The general partner is a great option too, because you're a part of the asset management as well. Like, you're literally owning. And also I've heard of something. It's the syndication aggregator. Have you heard about that? Do you know what that means?
No, I have not heard about that one, the syndication aggregator. But like if you kind of know the basics, I can kind of give my 2 cents over there.
Yeah, what it basically is, this is what I'm getting the win. So I'm learning all this stuff because I really want to be able to help as many people as I can. And so if I have people like doctors that have a lot of money, they want to invest with me. And so let me go ahead and figure out how to best of it. So I'm learning all this. So the syndication aggregator is somebody that is helping with a syndication. So let's say the GP, the general partner, they're the main syndicator. I would be the aggregator, which I'm aggregating that specific deal. It looks like I'm the main GP, but I'm not necessarily the main GP. They would go through my portal and all that sort of stuff. So I am bringing people into the deal, and then I could have multiple, general partners that I'm working with as aggregating their deals out to other people. Does that make sense?
That's kind of touching upon the first method, which to be legal, you have to be an asset management. You have to do something about assets. So there's a lot of it. I would just say the raising and syndicating a security rim is going through a whole process of deregulation. I think it's been happening for a couple of years. So then you get all these creative way of raising money. Some are maybe legal, some maybe not. So this is why getting a lawyer opinion on this, getting a second opinion, and not just trusting what people will tell you, oh, you can just do this, is really, really important. Our lawyer this is our different opinion. Our lawyer basically has advised us, just raising money, becoming a GP is not legal by security law, and getting paid per proportioning of what you, what you're raising for post raising is also not legal, unless if you have a security license as a broker. what they call the broker license, right? So broker dealer license. But basically, because you can't be paid for just raising money. Now, on the other hand, if Dustin, you start doing construction bidding, creating a list of that, aiding asset management, sitting on the calls, making decisions, underwriting the deals, and like all that stuff involved in addition to just raise money, then you have a substantial basically involvement into the deal, and you are asset managing. You're asset managing a small portion of it, but you still asset managing. So at that point, it becomes your deal. Again, check in with a lawyer. Everything I say here, I'm just gonna with a disclaimer. I am not a lawyer. These are simply things that we follow from our lawyer's suggestions. So as syndication aggregator, what I heard over there is a capital raiser. Also another word for capital raising as GPs. So I would say my verdict on this one is like, it doesn't sound quite legal. So when it cracks like a duck, it's probably a duck. And when security team kind of looked at it, they, when the security SEC comes and knock on your door, when they do the audit of these, they're going to look at the activity that's included in that. For our deal, we have partners as well. And then all our partners sits on our asset call. They make collective decisions. So in sense, that is, actually asset managing along with us.
Got it. So if in order to be a general partner, so if I want to have a deal and there's an apartment complex, somebody that found the deal is coming to me and say, hey, I want to partner with you. So you bring the capital. We have a great property. We're going to manage a property. I can bring people into the deal. I don't have to have a securities license and all that sort of stuff if I am a part of the deal, or if I'm a general partner of it.
Yeah, if you're a general partner. Yeah.
Now, how many is one deal, like, am I the sole general partner, or can they be multiple general partners?
There can be multiple general partners. So for example, there are general partners who is going to co-sign on the loan. That's a additional responsibility that they're putting their credibilities online to KP, what we saw principal KP. Not all KP are general partners, but if you allocate them general partner shares, that they are general partners, right? So we have investors like that, and basically, they get compensated to co-sign on the loan. And then there's other general partners that like multifamily with couple hundred units. It is going to be really difficult to run it just by yourself. We have a team running it. We not only have team to run it, we also have partners that allocate a specific task to run them, right? So you, Dustin, for example use here is you may be really good with construction, building the team list, the construction. So in addition to you raising money, you're managing all the capital X, improvement projects. So you're definitely a general partner specialized in capital expenditure projects. So you are involved in that capacity. You can be that GP. And there's other GPs who may be doing day-to-day operations, right? And then even within the day-to-day operation GP, there may be multiple people doing different type of things. So my partner, I want to just use an example, my partner, Jonathan, he is in pretty much our deals. He in fact is working on we're kind of working on integrating his company into our company. So essentially we're kind of doing a merge. That's because the long-term relationships we have built up. And then for each deals, we have a set of responsibility. We split it between us. So we're both GPs in these deals. So therefore we have investors, both me and him, we have investors to be in these deals.
It seems like out of all of them, I would like to get to where I have a fund, but I would probably start as a GP. Now, if you're going to be a GP, walk me through, like, do I need to create my own LLC, or is that one deal its own LLC and then you're a part of that? Like, walk me through that process. And then from there, I want to get into, if somebody's going to lend money, we have to have it's like one bank account that's for just this deal. And how do we have a portal? Because I've seen plenty of websites, like companies that people log into and you can see all the tracking and all that sort of stuff, because I've been invested in passively into syndications as well. So start with the beginning. Like, do I create an own LLC for my syndication, or is that property, the multifamily, that one deal, that's its own LLC? How does that work out?
The process is when we find a property. And by the way, GP has many different duties, right? Like, for example, you can be the person who found the deal as well. So, lots of activities that's there. But the key is you want to do some operations. So for us, Basically, when you first find a property, what we would do is we'll create an LLC that would operate the property. So per property, we'll create 1 or 2 bank accounts, depends on the lender requirements. And then within that LLC, then we will have all members. There are managers and there are members. So usually the general partners are within the manager structure, with it being the manager. So that's legal documents drafted up by your lawyer. It can be various. Some people would just have it directly in there, as GPs listed as managers. But other document I've seen, which is one that we follow, is we create a manager structure. So then we're part of that manager structure. And then all your LPs are actually member of that LLC as well. Investors who are LPs can invest through LLC or them individually. It's very low liability for them. So there's not too much of a difference, in my opinion, investing through LLC or individual if you're LP. But as a GP, there's a certain amount of liability, not necessarily from the people who you syndicated money from, because that's SEC rule. You have to file blue sky filing in any states where your investor resides in. So that's a security process. And your lawyer will take care of that for you. But you yourself, you want to maybe put in a Wyoming LLC or Nevada LLC, especially if you're not the main GP, main sponsor. Because the main sponsor, like myself, my name is stamped everywhere anyways. In Arizona, there's a disclosure rule, so you have to register. A name has to be given to a property. So that's why my tenant can find who I am and this and all that stuff. Doesn't matter what kind of LLC that we set up. But if you're not the main sponsor, then, or even the secondary person, because only one person has to be registered right over there. So you can create your Wyoming or Nevada LLC. So that's way it's not entirely anonymous, but the person who wants to sue you, typically a tenant wants to sue you, they have to go an extra length to go to Nevada or Wyoming in physically to request for who is the member of this particular LLC. So that gives you a little bit of protection over there. So I would highly recommend for general partners, whoever's thinking about doing general partner, to create the LLC for the general partnership portion. And then if you also passively invest into the deal, which we always do because it's our deal, if you're a GP, you should feel good to put the money in there. So we invest through another LLC, a separate LLC. So this way there's separation of your general partner liabilities and your LP, which is very low liability. So that's kind of how I structure mine. And I would recommend people kind of follow that general rule. And because there is additional liability getting exposed, or just the harassment sometimes that you're getting. Certain people are not happy with certain things happening, then, there could be these going on. In general, the lawsuits are covered by the LLC of the property, the LLC that you created for the property, because there are liability coverage, insurance, and etc. So usually that covers everything, but every once in a while, there may be people who wants to sue you directly, most tend this doesn't kind of really apply, and this can not really stand, but it does put a little bit more resistance in between that. Yeah,
that makes sense. And so, I mean, it seems like there's a lot of different things that we'd have to have a lawyer to make sure that everything's done very, very well, so we're protected as well. So with that, let's say you got 15 different investors. They're going to invest $100,000 each. That all goes into the one bank account that you created for the LLC. And you said if it's a certain bank, it might have two. But all that money would pool in, and then they would get a portion of the deal with that money that they're investing. Is that correct?
So the LPs were expected to basically sign company agreement, which is that LLC that you create for the property because they're a member of it. And they're expected to go through something called a PPM. It's private placement memorandum, because private placement it's the investment type. You're investing not in the public market, but in a private placement. Memorandum basically spells out all the detailed terms and the payout structures, the waterfall structures, and etc. for the limited partner. Usually it's about 80-90 page long, 60 to 90 page long, depends on the deals. And you should read it very carefully as a passive investor. I usually say on your first go around, but actually condition changes for each deal, even with the same sponsor. So it's a really prudent thing to do to make sure that you read through certain clauses with detail. So this way, you know this very well. Don't just assume same deal worked for the same sponsor before. That's how they structure it now. Right. So that's kind of like the difference. And the money is pooled in the GP method. Basically, the money is wired to a single account where the LLC holds. It's really advised that there's only one person tracking the wire or one team tracking the wire income. So in our operation, our account management team tracks the wire income. And then making sure we get back to the investors on, hey, we have received your wire. So there's a whole process over there we have create. And then if you're doing the fund management, it's slightly different. It's you would take on that overhead account management burden to make sure the investor is actually wiring money into your fund account, whatever that you hold bank account. And then you just cut a single check from that fund bank account to the to the property syndicated entity. So that's kind of the difference between the two.
Yeah, I
and
get
then
it.
the benefits are creating a fund is that none of your investor information is now published to the sponsor. So your sponsor don't actually know who all invested in her deal, he or his deal, from your fund. All they know is Dustin has a fund and the fund invested into the deal.
So starting a fund, I don't really necessarily want to get down that rabbit hole, but it sounds like you have to get certified by the government, and you have a lot of things that you need to make sure that you're going to be doing right per the government.
Yeah. And then there's a fund fees. That's also typically fund is based on the fees. But even if you have fund, you can maybe ask for a GP promo into the main syndication deal, getting paid from there. So the structure is a little bit different. How you getting paid is a little bit different, because you may be not a GP, but you may be just transferring a fund. So there's a delta on pre-agreed fees that is paid to you, or the margin. Because usually what would happen is the syndicator, if you bring a very large check, they may create a special class just for you, right? So in that, you may get a better promotion for that, or a better discount, or better return. And this is where you make up your fees. So then you can pass on the good deal to your passive investor. So that will be like slightly different between the two different models.
Man, that's great. So it seems like for me, in the route that I want to go, is to be a general partner and bring people on and be a part of a deal that actually benefits everybody. How do we make sure that the people that are investing into the company, those are the LPs, correct? Those are the LPs that are investing. So those LPs, how do we make sure they know what they're getting? Because I know when I get somebody wanted me to become an LP, what they'll say is, okay, it's an 8% return. We're hopefully exit within 3 to 5 years and all that sort of stuff. And with that 8%, it's 8% on the money that they have put in, not necessarily like how much of the value of the entire property that they own. Okay, go ahead and can you explain that? Like, how do we make sure that the investor gets their money?
Yeah, so the investors kind of knows. So it's always, as LPs, you're always investing and calculating the return on the money that you have invested. So 8% cash on cash return simply means that 8% of your $100,000 dollars that you have invested, which will be $8,000 every single year, right? So that's kind of like what that is calculated on. And then typically the way that the syndicator, the LPs get set up is seasoned syndicator typically have a syndication portal. So your investor can sign on, etc. And there's a system, some syndication portal, not all of them, has the ability to issue distributions to direct deposit into the investor's account. So that's kind of typically how they receive their distribution for our for our LP investors. There's also checks being mailed, as what we do not mail checks. We make sure everybody has ACH information. We do direct deposit because it's traceable. But in the old school way, there are checks being mailed. And checks being cut, checks being mailed. So every quarter, typically that distribution schedule is that. And there's usually a certain period of time, call it 6 months to a year, depends on your deal, because deals can be very different. Some deal may not have cash flow at all, right? Some deal has cash flow. And if you're doing value add projects, typically we will hold off the distribution for the first 6 months until the deal is kind of on its good state. Then we'll start the distribution. So typically you should expect that whether it's quarterly distribution or monthly distribution, these two are very common. I do invest in development funds. When you invest in development funds, there's no cash flow. So don't expect any distribution until at the end when it sells, right? So, but it could be structured as in there may be phase 1 and phase 2. So maybe when phase 1 is done, there's some cash flow. And then phase 2 is when the whole equity gets returned. So, many different structure of the deal. It's all spelled out in the PPM, and the investor typically receive that directly to them. In the fund-to-fund model, or in the fund model, you will be the person you as the fund manager will be the person who's responsible for issuing these payments to them. So then the way that works is that me as the main syndicator, I will issue you a big distribution, and then you have to figure out your pro rata investment from your investors and distribute that to them. So there is additional management, what we also call the model as a fund-to-fund management model, which essentially means you as a fund, you aggregate all the fund, you manage all the fund, you manage all your investors, and then we do not have to do anything with the investor. It really depends what the two partner agrees on. Right. So for example, me and my partner, we have agreed on, because we have such a trust over there, we're just going to put them all in the same database and do all the stuff, do all the, centralize the distribution of the information. Now, if you're a partner that's not in that trust relationship, then there may be syndication portals that is really great for that. Syndication Pro is something that we use. Basically, we can write a monthly report to give people updates, and that then gets automatically sent to every single GP's leads. So we don't manage your leads, but essentially we do manage that communication. And then internally, there's discussions, because we always run our deal together. They're sitting on these weekly calls, like, we asset management all together. So there's not much of that information lagging. But in the case of when there is a main person, the information can be aggregated by you touching base with the person who's focusing on operation.
Got it. So if the property is making even more money than we imagined, and everybody's getting paid their 8%, does that rest of that money stay inside the business and that doesn't go to the LPs? That's just the GP and the other partner that take part in that?
Not the case. I think we have a few projects that has stabilized and does really well. So after we cashed our first stack, it really depends on the deal structure. So in this particular deal, what we had is 2 classes. We have our top class, Class A, which is just a cash flow position. There's no equity position. So then we have our Class B, which is the equity position. So what we do, the stack, how that works is our A gets paid first, and then the B gets paid to the pref rate that what we said they will. And then the general partner gets paid on the cash flow share. Then there's still excess amount remaining. We make a decision, and that's a decision made in the beginning of the deal, to use that accumulated cash to pay off Class A. So we have this like revolving class, which will allow us to pay off their principal. So of course, by paying off their principal, everybody's return increases. So that's the order. But it could also be, if you just did a straight cut with 70-30 split with a 7% pref, once the 7% has satisfied, the GP gets paid, then the excess amount gets split 70-30. So that could work that way as well. So either way, no, it shouldn't stay into the deal. It should be distributed to the investors, right? And then deals can be structured a million different ways. Some people will have deals structured in a way they can even pay off your principal early, for the equity investors. Which we don't do, because our equity investors invest in equity. So true equity investors, so their share doesn't get diluted, just because we pay them, if we pay them, it's always a comment as a distribution, return on equity, not return of equity. So these are some stuff to kind of look into in terms of how is the deal structure, and there's usually paragraphs of it in a private placement memorandum that you should go through with painstaking.
Man, there's so much to learn, and you could tell exactly, you've done this before. So I mean, especially when you're getting to 2,000 to 3,000 units, that's just terrific. So I know that I have a lot to learn. I'm definitely gonna be. So I was on your podcast, which everybody needs to check out your podcast. So you give us so much great advice, and I know people are going to want to learn more about you. There's so many more questions that I have, but run out of time. How can people find you? How can they listen to your podcast? How can they even work with you?
So we do have a podcast, 10,000 Financial Independence, which Dustin, you're a guest on. Well, I highly recommend checking out his episode because there's some really great nuggets about investing. And I love the stuff that you talked about, building your team first before, you actually even start looking for a property. That's like super awesome advice. And you can also check us out on the YouTube channel, which we would love to kind of really grow our audience over there by subscribing to us, like our videos, or put some comments in there. And you can also check us out in order to contact us or schedule time with me or my team. You can go to www.easyfi university. So that's easyfi spelled out university.com. And under the About Me pages, there's a link to schedule a time with me. So we have a lot of free article knowledges about this, passive investor mindsets, and also, deal structure stuff up there as well.
This is great. Elisa, thank you so much for being on the show. You've given us, giving me lots of advice and insights into this whole world. I mean, I'm super pumped to be a part of it, and hopefully we can work together in the future. But thank you so much again, Lisa, for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dustin, for your time. Yes.